So today we're going to be talking about game-storming your way to awesome business requirements. So game-storming is a product name. It's a book about techniques you can use for facilitation and workshops. So I'm going to be talking about a range of techniques that we can use around gathering our requirements. So my name's Clay. I work for Soul Sailor Consulting, and we're a small micro consultancy, very much focused on enabling organisational value by disrupting people's technology projects. Actually, by positively disrupting people's technology projects. Don't want you to feel it's negative. So I try and kind of work with organisations to move away from the status quo. You know, a lot of what we're doing around technology projects, especially in the SharePoint world, I've found, is adequate. It's, you know, we're delivering projects fine, but I think could be improved. There's lots of ways and lots of things that we can do and experiences that we can bring from other industries and other technologies that can really help us with our SharePoint work. So I work with clients to try and do that and be that disruption. I'm an author, sort of author. So I'm writing a book on governance, for those of you that were at my session yesterday. I've got a, should we say, a different approach to governance than most people, I think. But if you're interested in that, then you can download a copy, and there's a discount code there. So please, if governance is something that's interesting for you, then please download and have a look at that. So the agenda for today. So what I want to talk about is really why traditional requirements techniques are, in my opinion, broken. Yeah, and why they don't really work as effectively as they could do. Then we're going to talk, really, this was like, we were going to flow through it nicely, but actually these bottom sections are really going to be quite intermingled. But we'll talk about what I think the key elements are for ensuring that your project delivers the right thing. So most of us deliver technology projects really well. You're all very clever people and we can deliver projects. But quite often I think we deliver the wrong things really, really well, which, is great, but not really what the business probably wanted. So we'll talk about how we can ensure that the projects that we're working on will actually deliver the right things. And I'll give you some insights, hopefully, into some of the techniques that I use that you can hopefully go away tomorrow and start using to help you facilitate what I class as awesome business outcomes. That might be bigging it up a little bit. It is business requirements after all. It's not that exciting, but I get a little bit excited sometimes. So hopefully at the end of this session you'll have some insights as to why things may not be going as well, why you end up with maybe customers going, that's not quite what we wanted from a business requirements perspective, and have some tools in your kit bag and some ideas as to how you can improve on that when you get back to work tomorrow. Cool. So I want to start off with SharePoint as a technology platform rocks. It is brilliant. Yeah, you guys, people at this conference, can deliver really, really fantastic solutions on the SharePoint platform. It really is a very, very powerful platform. I think that's why we're all here, really, to learn more and to learn about doing more awesome things with it. But the challenge we've got, I think, is that although this is what we want, a happy client, hopefully, yeah. So this is an actual client. He is actually smiling, and that's some prioritization of his requirements. So he was happy. But what actually happens a lot of the time is we end up with depressed, fed up end users. Yeah? Hands up who's had users that maybe not cowering in a corner, but aren't happy with the results that you've produced. Yeah? Of course, everybody, end users are a pain, they're never happy. But hopefully we can, sorry for any end users here, but we need to try and support them. We need to try and do more work and help them so that actually they're not fed up with the technology solutions that we're delivering, that we can actually deliver value to them and they're actually happy and enjoying using SharePoint. What I've found is that when we're delivering technology projects, we end up quite often with what I call the celery effect. So I am going slightly mad, but the celery effect is, if you think about a stick of celery, if you eat a stick of celery, you get, I think it's about 8 calories of energy, yeah, about 8 calories. But the actual act of picking up the stick of celery, munching away on it for 5 minutes, digesting it, etc., all of that actually burns off about 14 calories. So you eat a stick of celery, you get a negative calorific intake. Great for me, but not really what we want from food. And I often see SharePoint projects being very similar to this. If you think about it, we spend lots and lots of time and money on the infrastructure, the licensing, the actual project cost to deliver the project, bringing in consultants, and then there's all the costs that we potentially don't trap, the time for the business in workshops to generate the requirements, the time for the business to do testing, to do training on the solution. And if we add up all of those things, all of those costs, and then compare it to the business value that we're actually delivering for the organisation, I find in a lot of cases actually the costs far outweigh the value. Does that make sense? Do you guys get that? Do you think if you really, hand on heart, added up all of those costs and then measured the value, for a start that means you've got to measure the value and know what you're trying to achieve. And a lot of us find that difficult because that is a challenge. But I've definitely found in my experience that most organisations are delivering SharePoint projects that aren't really delivering the value that they can, and actually they're probably a negative ROI. How many of you measure ROI for your SharePoint projects? One person, 1.5, 2? Yeah, sort of measure it, yeah. Not many people do, because it's difficult in a lot of cases, depending on what you're doing, and we just don't think about doing those sort of things. And what happens if we end up delivering SharePoint celery? What we end up with is this kind of situation that we, for years we've been trying to build the bridges between the IT and the business. But we get a situation where the business users are telling us what they want. And they think they're articulating it well. They're saying, we want this solution to do X, Y, Z. SharePoint team, they listen to those requirements, they capture them, they deliver a solution. And then at the end of it, they look at that solution and go, guess what? The business are saying, well, you've not delivered what I wanted, what I've asked for. It's not working in the way I wanted it. IT are going, the business are crazy. They told us what we wanted, we've delivered it. Why can't they be happy? Yeah. So we end up with this rift, and that's what we need to try and move away from. And I think one of the reasons that we have this kind of rift, this kind of disparity between the business and the technology teams, is really that the technology we're implementing doesn't know anything. Think about it, the technology, SharePoint, it's just a load of ones and zeros on a DVD or downloaded from the cloud or whatever, on floppy disks back in the day. It is just a technology. It doesn't understand what business you're in. It doesn't know anything about the business problem you're trying to solve, the legislation that your company is under. It knows nothing about what we're trying to do. So to assume that we can just implement a technology, base it on some rough requirements that the users want to collaborate or they want to do knowledge management or an intranet, and think that they're actually going to get solved by just putting a technology in, really is a bit silly. I mean, we do it, I've done it, let's face it, I'm sure we all are, but the reality is the technology on its own isn't going to help us. The challenge is that whenever we're delivering solutions, we end up talking about tech features and not the business outcomes. I'm sure a lot of you have been in a session with an end user or business stakeholder, and that you've gone to them, so what requirements? What are your requirements? What do you want this solution to do? And they say, well, an intranet. Okay, so what do you want it to do? Well, what's the platform do? What will SharePoint do? What can SharePoint do? And you start reeling off some technical features. Well, you can do document libraries, store documents in them. You can do some workflow. We can do some social stuff. And the end users tend to go, yes, we'll have that, without really thinking about actually what are we trying to deliver. So they end up basically delivering a technology solution and just using it. And that tends to not deliver that much value. So what I'm saying is we don't actually have a technology problem. The challenges that we're facing aren't because of the technology. Because right at the start I said, technology rocks. The problem is really us. It's our approach, it's what we're doing. And you would think really that, having gone through technology project after technology project, we'd kind of get it right. We've been burnt many times by delivering requirements that weren't right or that the business didn't really want. So I think we need to fundamentally shift the way we deliver projects and the way we gather requirements, because we don't seem to be learning. And in fact, it's worse than you even think, because if we go back to 1995, so hands up who was doing technology projects back in 1995. Yeah, so a portion of you. So back then, why haven't we learnt yet? Back then, there was a report done called a Chaos Report, and it talks about project failure factors. And it lists 10 primary reasons why technology projects back in 1995 were failing. Right, so everybody stand up. I told you I'd wake you up somehow. Don't worry, I won't do this too often. Right, I want you to sit down when one of the reasons that I pop up on the screen, you've been burnt by. Okay? So sit down. If you've been burnt, so a project's gone wrong because of a lack of user input. Okay? Yeah. Okay? Sit down if you've been burnt by incomplete requirements. There we go. I very rarely get to number 3, but we're doing well. Well done. This is cool. Bang. Changing requirements and assumptions. Yes, excellent. Yay. Very rare. I've definitely never got to number 5. You know, everybody's normally gone. Yeah. So already, yeah, those first 3. Yeah, we've all been burnt by them. Sorry, I should have sat down probably on the first one as well. Other things are, you know, lack of executive support. Yeah, I'm sure we can all agree that that can hamper us. Incompetence with the technology, as in we just don't necessarily know what we're doing. We're using something new, or we just don't have the right skills. Lack of resources. Yeah, well, let's face it, you'd have all sat down now. Yeah. Unrealistic expectations of the business. You know, so they've got unrealistic expectations, or even just internally within the IT team, that you think you can develop something in 2 weeks, and actually it's going to take 2 months. Those sort of things. Unclear objectives. Yeah, you definitely all be down now. Yeah, unrealistic timeframes. Yeah, I could have probably put that first and we'd have all sat down. And last one, new technology. So just being burnt by trying to do something new. But that's kind of, you do it once, you get burnt, and then you move on. So even in 1995, yeah, we were having technology problems. Yeah, we had a technology project problems. Yeah, so that's nearly 20 years ago. And we're still sitting here going, yeah, still get hit by that. So we need to, obviously, you know, we've not learned. We probably still won't learn. But we need to try and address this problem in some way. Because, you know, with great technology comes great responsibility. Yeah, the platform is powerful. We can do lots of real value with it. But unless we think about it properly, we'll just deliver technology projects, SharePoint celery, or, you know, just stuff that people aren't going to want to use. And the challenge we've got is we're delivering people projects. So this is the fundamental reason I think that this is so hard. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in a second. But everything that we're doing, if you think about it, every SharePoint project I'm sure you've all delivered fundamentally affects the way a business user works. You think about it. They used to use file shares. We put a document library in. They now work differently. Yeah, and lots of other examples like that. So every SharePoint project is fundamentally affecting the way somebody works. That is a big, big deal. Yeah, if we're changing the way somebody works day in, day out, we've got to get that right. Because if we don't get that right, we're going to get annoyed users. We do get annoyed users. So we need to think about the people aspects of this. There's some great work done by Dave Snowden. Anybody heard of Dave Snowden? Yeah, 1 or 2 of you. So I'd definitely look him up. If, you know, he does a lot of work in the kind of agile world. There's a great YouTube video called the Cynefin Framework, and it kind of looks like that at the start of it. That's about 5 minutes long, that explains the Cynefin Framework in a load of detail, and a lot better than I'm about to explain it. But Dave Snowden, ex-IBM, and he came up with this Cynefin framework, and Cynefin's a Welsh word for home of multiple belongings. Doesn't actually have much relevance to what the framework is, but that's what Cynefin means. And really it's a kind of sense-making framework that we can apply, I think, to our SharePoint projects and the business projects and business problems that we're trying to solve. So if I take you through it very briefly, so this is my own sketch of the thing. We're going to ignore the orange bits. They do mean something. I can't remember what they are off the top of my head. So we'll ignore those. They're not necessary. Chaotic side of things. So yeah, well, I'm sure we all think our end users, our business projects are chaotic. Trust me, they're not quite chaotic. So what I want us to do is just go through this. I want to show why I think SharePoint projects are really hard, and why it's the kind of people aspect that really adds that dimension that means we need to change the way we work. Down here on the right, on the bottom right, is what Dave Snowden calls the simple zone. It's kind of the cause-effect area, what he calls the best practice. Yeah, and it's basically, you know, if I drop something, every time I drop it, it's going to fall to the ground, as long as there's gravity and all that usual stuff. But pretty much, it's repeatable. Every time I drop this Post-it note, it falls to the ground. if you think about the business problems you're trying to solve and the SharePoint projects you're implementing, does anybody truly think that they could repeat that solution at any other department, team, organisation and get exactly the same results? If anybody agrees, then I'm really in trouble. But yeah, no, I don't think you can. You know, this is very much best practice. It's repeatable. Every time we do it, we get the same results. If we think about people projects, we're all different. We all work differently. So that's almost impossible to do. Up in the complicated zone, a lot of people I think would probably, if I'd asked you before I showed this, would probably say SharePoint's complicated and maybe fits in that. Would that be fair to say? Possibly. Complicated zone is what's called good practice, and a great example would be Exchange. Now, I'm no Exchange engineer, but if we were a group of stakeholders in an organisation and we wanted to put email in, I could ask a few simple questions. How many users have you got? Are you geographically spread? What sort of devices have you got? Those sort of things. And I could probably sit in a dark room with an Exchange engineer, knock out a design for Exchange, implement it the next day. You've got email. Simplified slightly. I'm sure Exchange engineers do a lot more than that. But, that could probably be done. And that would work in any organisation. We'd go through that same process and we could deliver email. There may be the odd case where you've got something like a device like a BlackBerry and you need to put a BlackBerry server in. That's another good practice. Based on the experience of other people, based on their knowledge, we do BlackBerry servers this way. Yeah? Does that make sense? So Exchange, I think, very much fits into that category. But again, I'm sure that SharePoint doesn't. Yeah, SharePoint doesn't fit into that complicated zone. If we move over to complex, so the example I've got there is, if we assume that dice that looks like a music note is a music solution. The users have said they want a music solution. On the left, somebody's dancing to the music, a bit like some of you guys were last night. Yeah. On the right, someone's listening to the music. So there's two different behaviours. It could be the same person on a different day, different sort of scenario. But for that one music system, there's two users. And then somebody might come along and go, well, actually, I want to listen to music at night, and I'd like it to switch off after an hour. It's kind of when I go to sleep. Somebody else might say, well, actually, I want a music system that will wake me up, an alarm. Somebody else might want some other requirement. So once they've got this system, new requirements emerge, new use cases emerge out of how they would want to use it. If we take that context to a SharePoint world, say we've got, the HR department and they ask for a team site. And we're going to deliver something basic, some news and a document library. Very, very basic. No branding. We won't get into that now. Yeah, so some news and a document library. So HR get that. We work with them. We put the right bits of metadata, et cetera, and they get the solution they want. And finance director sees the HR director and goes, that looks pretty cool. We want that. What is it? Yeah, and they go, well, we can put news in there, we can store documents. Wow. Yeah, finance go, we need to do that. IT, deliver that for us. So we give finance the same solution. Yeah? Some news, document library. And they start using it. And then they say, well, actually, we work in a different way. We need workflow. And we need some more metadata. And you know what, that news, we don't, actually, it's not really news. Actually, all we need is a wiki so we can just record some thoughts. And it evolves. They get the solution, they start using it, and they understand more about their problem, and they also understand more about their requirements. Yeah? So I think SharePoint fits in this complex zone, which is emergent, which means the first version of anything you deliver to a client, they're not going to like. It's not going to necessarily suit all of their requirements. It's not going to be perfect. Does that make sense? Would you agree that the first version of any of the SharePoint projects you've done, people have gone, that's great, but? Yeah? Hi.
I had a different experience, but it's similar. It's often the first approach that I think of with SharePoint is not the best one. So let's say I think of a wiki, and then, oh no, it's a discussion board. It's the same sort of thing, right? But
absolutely.
I do it in my head rather than actually delivering it. But I find in general it's easy to pick something and it's not the one option you should pick.
Absolutely, because our understanding of things is a lot clearer when we've got that concrete thing in our head or when you work through the scenario. Absolutely. Yeah, so if we're living in this world, day in, day out, if we sat down with the user and said, right, guys, so front row, what's your requirements for an intranet? And I write those down and go and deliver it. Is that going to work for the business if we assume this whole room's a business? Probably not. So we need to think more about how we can, I guess, structure our requirements gathering to fit in this emergent world, try and deliver more value, and allow users to kind of start using the solution and, basically tell us what they need and evolve it, which isn't necessarily an easy thing. So if we think that get my words out, an analytical way may not be the right approach, then maybe BA is not appropriate. So BA is dead. Unfortunately, BA, well, not unfortunately, fortunately, BA isn't dead. He's still alive, I think, isn't he? Doing very questionable chocolate adverts. But if we think about what BA stands for, not BA, but BA, business analysis, I think in our SharePoint world, in most situations, business analysis is dead. Not business analysts. Love business analysts. They're not dead. They're still alive and kicking. But in a lot of cases, our SharePoint solutions aren't based on a process. It's not something we can map and write and improve. Yeah, we're talking about emergent things, so we need a different approach. Way back in, I think it was about 1999, we were at this, according to Wikipedia, this crux of intranets becoming kind of widespread. I think IBM was probably the dominant player. Microsoft, I don't think had even produced a mainstream product yet. So way back in 1999, around that time, I think a fundamental shift in our approach to requirements gathering should have happened, and we all missed it. What happened before that, technology tended to be about taking a process and making it quicker, less error prone, reducing risks, those sort of things. So we took a process and we basically made it better. Most technology at that point was around that. After 1999, around that time when we started doing intranets and starting to try and collaborate and things like that, what we were trying to do then was really augment human processes and actually do more and make the art of the impossible possible with technology. Now, if we're doing new things that we couldn't do before, then analysing what we used to do before isn't really going to help us. So we needed to move at that point, I think, to a more facilitative way of working. One of the other reasons, a famous quote by Donald Rumsfeld, the United States Secretary of Defense. So he said, I can't remember the context of this, but what he said was that there are known knowns. So they're the requirements that when I ask, what are your requirements, that you tell me. He also said there are known unknowns. So if we think in the SharePoint context, they're the sort of requirements you don't need. You're doing a social intranet, you don't need to know about records management, because that's not what you're doing. But then there's this thing, which I always struggle to say, but there are also unknown unknowns. There's stuff we don't know that we don't know. Does that confuse the hell out of you all? It certainly did the first time I read it. So the unknown unknowns, I think, are where the majority of requirements live. So known stuff, the requirements that if I ask you, you're going to tell me, very small portion. Larger portion is the stuff that we don't really care about for project X. The rest of the requirements are these ones that we don't know. So asking them, trying to use analytical approaches to get those isn't going to work because we don't know it. If I ask you, tell me the requirements that you don't know you've got. You're going to, basically you're going to sack me and tell me to walk out the door, but you're not going to be able to answer that. So how do we get this? How do we find this sort of mythical beast of requirements? So one old approach would be for me to stand here in front of you with maybe a spreadsheet and go, right, what are your requirements? Or to watch you work and say, right, okay, based on this, we need to improve this. Those are kind of techniques. We could do a survey. How cool would that be? We'll send a survey out to the users and ask them what they want. But of course, they don't know necessarily everything that they want, so that's not going to work either. So what I'm trying to do with my clients is work in a lot more collaborative way and use facilitation techniques. Not quite as playful as that. Although that would be quite fun. If I could work out how to use one of those to gather requirements, I'd probably have done it by now. But play and facilitation and kind of hands-on activities, it's a damn sight more fun in a workshop. Yeah, we've all sat in requirements workshops where you've gone round the table and people have said what they want. Yeah, the first person's fell asleep by the time you're at the third person, and it's not very engaging. It really isn't an enjoyable process. But using more playful techniques, using sort of facilitation, using visual stuff is a lot more fun, and actually you get a lot better results. Again, we're not going to get to this point, but if you remember back, some of us further back than others, remember back to when we played, we had fun when we were playing. We enjoyed it. We learned. We had new experiences. Yeah? So I think we need to get back to this kind of playful state in our workshops and look more at using those sort of techniques. Now you might think that's kind of crazy. Well, I guess you're in the session, so you probably don't think it's too crazy. But some of the reasons we do this is that through play we can get these emergent requirements. We can see emergent behaviours. We can get to the unknown unknowns. So how do these work? Well, game storming, innovation games, all of these kind of techniques I've lumped into my own made-up sort of word collaborative play, because that's what we're doing. We're playing, but we're collaborating. The reason these work, really, rather than, say, just open-ended brainstorming, is that these techniques are time-bound. So most workshops, let's do this for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever. They're egalitarian. So I don't care whether you're the CEO or a call center operative, your post-it note is equally as valuable. Your opinion is equally as valuable. So I'm trying to find out all of your requirements. I'm trying to understand what you want to do. So it's very much an egalitarian method. Participatory. If I've got a session and I've got post-it notes across a wall, if you're sat in the corner not participating, it's very, very obvious that you're not contributing. So what normally happens is, if people don't want to work in that way, they just go. And that's fine, because they weren't contributing anyway. Go and do your email and stuff. Yeah, slightly harsh, but people that are actually actively participating enjoy the process and get value out of it. And it's structured and purposeful. So I'll show you in a minute, we'll go through some techniques, but they have a purpose. We're generating requirements, we're innovating, we're prioritizing, we're trying to understand context. So whereas open brainstorming is kind of quite fluffy, these at least are trying to achieve something. The other thing that I like about these kind of techniques is it allows us to kind of do, at every step of the way, this check to make sure that the requirements that we're gathering are aligning to a vision. And we'll talk about vision in a second. But they make sure that everything that we're delivering actually adds value to the organisation. So we can reduce waste, we can reduce risk by not doing stuff that we don't need to, and we can be very much focused on getting value out of that platform. So it's a great technique. You do it sort of if you move this way, if you kind of map this way, you've got a list of requirements, and each one of those requirements should add value and help you achieve your vision. And if you want to know how you're going to achieve your vision, it's through those requirements. And you can structure that, project and program and stuff like that, but we can talk about that afterwards. So, the reason you're here is to deliver, or to understand how to deliver awesome business requirements. So we better start talking about some techniques before we run out of time. So, I'm going to take you through, I think it's about 10 different techniques. Now, normally if I do this in a workshop, we would do those techniques. I think that might take a little bit too long with all of us here. It'd be great fun, I'd love to do that, but we probably shouldn't. So what I'm going to do is try and demonstrate how we can do these techniques to add clarity and end up generating really good business requirements. I don't know whether this is going to work, hopefully it will, but I'm going to try and actually do it on the whiteboard or on here, depending on the technique, and kind of show you how easy it is. This isn't about doing anything really, really fantastically, artistically drawn. It's not about being really, really precise. This is around understanding and gaining insights into your business stakeholders' requirements. Okay? So the first technique I want to talk about is, let me just backtrack a second. There's 4 steps. I remember why I put the steps video in there. Not the steps video, that would be terrible, wouldn't it? The steps picture. There's 4 steps I think that we should use. The first is getting context. Where are we? Where are we as an organisation? Where are we as a business process? Whatever it is, and where are we going? So before we start anything, where are we and where are we going? It gives us our context. The second is obviously the requirements facilitation. So how are we going to get there? What activities, what functions, features do we need to do to get to our goal? The third then is prioritization. How do we get there in the most effective way? And then the final one, which is one that I added recently actually, is what I call working out loud, which isn't really about requirements gathering, but it's about gaining engagement once we've got those requirements. And I'll explain that a little bit later. Okay, so first is context, second requirements, third prioritization, the fourth one is kind of working out loud. So, the first thing, an activity I use for context is called Spiderweb. Spiderweb was taken from the Innovation Games book, a book by a guy called Luke Homan, based over in the States. It's basically unstructured brainstorming. So I said that we don't do brainstorming, in this case I do. And basically the focus of your project in the center. So it could be records management, knowledge management, intranet homepage, web part, whatever it is, the focus of your project you put in the middle. And then you get everybody in the workshop to put on Post-it notes anything to do with that project. So it could be, who are the users? What are the user groups? What sort of information's flowing through it? What external systems are linked in some way? And you build up a context. So this is where I'm going to see whether this works. So I'm going to go over here and scare the cameraman because he's now got to follow me. So we put in the project text. So we'll call it an intranet, yeah? I might even get some people to do some work in a minute. So I won't start with you just because you're there. So we put the intranet in the middle, yeah? And then what we think about things. So what user groups could we have around an intranet? So there could be, I don't know, the exec team. They always like to get a mention. So, and I apologise for my writing. It doesn't really matter that you can't read this. So somebody might put the exec team down. Somebody might put Word documents. Yeah, what else goes into an intranet?
Social groups.
Social?
Social groups.
Social. We'll just, right, social, absolutely. Yeah.
Directory.
Directory, yeah. Staff directory, yeah. Staff directory. So that's more functionality. So I tend to, when I'm facilitating this, I'll always put it up because you've said it. But because if I take it down, you're going to disengage in the whole process. There's a whole, I don't know, it's a science or an art about Post-it notes and psychology around Post-it notes, but I'd love to get into it. But staff directory is more of a requirement which comes later. Pictures a day. It's a requirement. News. So it's more, so there might be pictures of a day. If that was important, that might be, news would be a good one. Pictures a day might be if that was something that was very clear that it was going through a process. So yeah. So we're trying to stay away from requirements, but we are trying to pick up artifacts to do with it. And what you, sorry? Navigation? Oh, you always have to pick a tricky one, don't you? Navigation. Is that a requirement? It's not a requirement. Is that context? You need to navigate it. I think we'll accept that one. I'm just going to write nav because we'll run out of time. But yeah, so navigation. So there's all things around it. You might have other teams. You might have external systems. So let's put HR system. Yeah. So you put all of these things on, and then you start drawing links towards them. And this is where it gets really messy, hence it being called Spiderweb. But the intranet needs these things. Yeah. Staff directory might be linked to the HR system. Word, social, what else have we got? The exec team might do a lot of Word stuff. They might drive news. And you basically build up a picture. Now, this might seem, well, it does, I was going to say, it might seem messy. It is very, very messy. But if you think about, as you're doing, and typically I do about half an hour session with people just putting their own Post-it notes, not me being a bottleneck. So everybody's just slapping Post-it notes on, drawing links between them, sometimes writing the context of the links. But you end up with this big picture around everything to do with the intranet. And what I found is you get things emerging. So all of these techniques, you end up with something at the end of it. Yeah. Piece of paper with a load of Post-it notes on it or some other random stuff that we'll talk about in a minute. But you end up with this artifact, which is valuable in itself. But the conversations people are having while they're putting these Post-it notes and linking, that's really, really important. So it's hard work. As a facilitator, you're making sure people are using the techniques right, but you're also listening to all of those conversations and writing notes down as to what people are doing. So I've found this really, really useful because it's low cost. It's 45 minutes of your time, just get the context in. I think it's really, really powerful. And it just gives you, as a consultant, as a project team, a really good feel for the overall context of what you're trying to achieve. Does that make sense? Any questions on that one? So that's the first part of the context. I'll leave that up for a moment. So what do we do next? So there's more contextual ones. I don't always do all of these. This is one of my favourites. So Sailboat is derived from an Innovation Games book activity called Speedboat. And basically what it is a mechanism of collaboratively finding out what people hate about the current solution and what they love about it. And it is as simple as going to your whiteboard or piece of paper, drawing a very bad boat. I'm a sailor as well. You'd think I'd draw better pictures of boats, really. Yeah? So you draw a boat. You call the boat, because boats, it's actually bad luck to not name a boat. So you call the boat whatever the project is. So we'll call it Intranet. That's a really bad name, but we'll do that. I suppose I best put a sail on and stuff. Otherwise we're not going. And you're assuming that the boat is trying to get to your goal, to your destination. Okay? So that's the context of the exercise. And then you get people, what we'll do is we get people to write down over the course of, say, 5 minutes, everything that's dragging the intranet back, everything that's stopping the intranet being effective for you, which is basically everything you hate about it. So I can guarantee somebody will put search down, somebody will put speed, yeah, somebody's probably going to put the colours, and you represent them as anchors. You don't necessarily have to draw anchors, because I'm terrible at it, that's it. Yeah, you draw anchors, and you assume that these bad things are basically weighing you back, and then you put, search, and you get people to put them one at a time this time. So you, as a group, you generate all these post-it notes, and then one at a time you put them down. So search is a real pain. And obviously then you'll end up grouping, as I've kind of shown, you end up grouping some. So this is actually quite a problem. Yeah, that's not so much of a problem. So you start getting a feel for how big a challenge and whether everybody thinks something's a problem or just one person doesn't like it. Yeah, so you build up this picture of things that people don't like or isn't working about your current solution. Okay, does that make sense? So what else don't we like about this solution? Let's put more than one post-it note up. What else do people hate about it? Navigation. Excellent, because that's on the previous post-it note, yeah? So we can sort that. So navigation. So they're the negative things. And that's what I find is people go crazy. I did it once. It's really funny. People were building this up, and it literally covered, I was using this size of paper, it filled that. I had to draw the water higher to give space. There was so much negativity. And then the other thing I do is do the same exercise, but ask people to think of the positive stuff. If we didn't keep a feature or some sort of element of value, you would be really annoyed. So you do get some intranets, people do like something about their intranet, bizarrely. Yeah, there's usually one or two post-it notes that go up there. So somebody might like the speed. Nobody's ever said that, but somebody might like the speed of your intranet. And they're like the wind blowing in your sails, helping you get to your vision. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Do you target the people that are going to attend these sessions?
Good question.
Because, if
Yeah.
you've got 1,000 people in an organisation, you can't.
You can't do it, no, absolutely. So this is hard to scale to 1,000 people and getting so the idea is absolutely you would get everybody involved in these sessions. Absolutely, that's nirvana. And that's not going to happen. How do we target it? The typical project will have a set of stakeholders probably already identified that they were going to be involved with anyway, with the project. I try and then extend that out. So I try and say, look, we need people from the board. We need people from the call centre. We need basically representation across the business. And you may want to run this. I tend to favour not running it in, right, okay, let's do this team, and this team, because you get kind of what's called groupthink. Everybody starts saying things. So I try and have a very mixed group. But the reality is most businesses will only stomach you taking so many people out of their business to gather requirements.
What's an ideal number then?
So for a workshop, 8 to 12 is a really good number. I've run them to sort of about 20, but you would then have multiple facilitators. So it's great. If you've got 5 people that can facilitate and run these games, then you could basically have, we could have one going here. We could do the room, so to speak, now with 3 or 4 facilitators. Typically, I tend to be facilitating on my own, and it tends to be 8 to 12, maybe a few more depending on the activities. And you'd run that multiple times, capture the results, aggregate them, get your insights. Okay? Yeah. So does that make sense? This gives us this nice picture then of what are problems, and these problems are things in theory that can be solutions. They're things that we can deliver. If we can fix this, we're adding value, potentially. We may be fixing the wrong things. I'll talk about that in a minute. And these are things that we need to make sure that we don't get shot of. Yeah? So if we stop having a speedy intranet, they're going to be annoyed. Yeah?
So at this point, when you're doing the workshops, do you try and avoid any SharePoint terminology?
I completely avoid SharePoint terminology for the whole process. Yeah, but that's just me. It's not always possible, but I tend to try and term things in business terms because we're trying to gather business requirements. The clever people in the room that know the technology will be able to map what bits of technology, what custom dev, etc. will meet those business requirements. But my view is we're delivering a solution for the business. Let's not constrain the business by saying, yeah, but workflow works in this way, so you can't really do that. Let's find out what they want, and then at a later point, maybe have a conversation with the business and change their requirements to fit the technology, depending on budgets and how you want to drive it. But I always start from a very puristic sense of, if you want it, that's fine. It goes down, I'm happy. Okay, no worries. Cool. So that's Sailboat. So that gives us sort of pros and cons. The next exercise, which again, I love a lot of these exercises, otherwise I wouldn't do it, but this is taken from the Gamestorming book, and it's called Cover Story. So this is a really, really important activity. This is about generating a vision for your project. Generating a vision. This is, where are we going? What are we trying to achieve? And I try and couch this when I'm having the conversations about this in terms of what difference is this project going to make to your business? Yeah, that's the focus. What is it going to do to your business? Not your team, your department, you as an individual, but to the overall organisation. So I try and get people to think about the business and not just themselves. Because if we make finance really effective by giving them a timesheet system that needs filling in twice a day, it's going to make the rest of us very ineffective. We need to be looking at the whole rather than just individuals. So what this activity is called Cover Story, and what we do is we're basically imagining the project was already a success. It's been delivered, it's been fantastic, we've made a huge amount of difference to our business and to our customers. So successful that Time magazine run a front page and a middle spread of it. Yeah. So what we're building, and this is through sketching, post-it notes, whatever you can get your hands on, is the vision for our project. So on here, we draw, sketch, post-it note, what the home page is. What is the big message? What difference has it made? Intranet solution saves lives. It's always a good vision to have, isn't it? If your intranet can save a life, that's great. I was doing some work for a charity that's to do with saving lives, and actually, their vision wasn't that far from that, because the difference it made of having an effective intranet meant they could move funds to research, which meant actually they could probably save lives earlier. That was quite a powerful one. You know, an intranet for a small business manufacturing widgets isn't going to be as powerful, but you know, it's no less effective. So we have that big vision there. Here we put the big headline. So what is it going to deliver? They're kind of the lower level requirements. We're not talking about features. We're not talking about it's going to be a document library. We're just talking about things that it's going to do, the value it's going to deliver. Over here in the quotes section, that's an interesting one. Quotes is where we think about, it's already been delivered. If I asked the project manager what they thought of the solution, or if I asked the call center person what they thought, or the end user, what would they say? And what you're trying to get yourself to think is, what I want the business to say is, this saves me so much time, I'm so much more efficient. Or the customer, the end customer, to say, I don't know what they've done, but now whenever I call up with a query, they've got the answer straight away. You know, I don't get passed from pillar to post. So you're trying to understand from an outside view, what will people think of your solution? And then finally, really, because I ignore some of the other bits, is sidebars, and that's kind of like the measurable stuff. So if we implement this intranet effectively, and it's a huge success, people's efficiency is going to increase by 80%. We'll reduce paper to 5%, down by 50%. We'll will make everybody 100% happier. And the reality is the numbers don't really matter at all because, let's face it, we're right early in the stage. We don't know how efficient we're going to make things. But the fact that we want people to be more efficient, or we want to reduce paper, reduce email use, all of those things are, in effect, indicators that we can start measuring. And we also, if you think about that goal alignment, if that's our vision, if there's a requirement that actually doesn't reduce paper, it increases paper, then it shouldn't be a requirement. Does that make sense? Yeah, so we can start using this to come up with a vision. And I do this, 2 or 3 groups, same as all the exercises tend to be in groups of sort of 5 to 7, something like that. And you collaboratively create these. And I found in organisations, 6 months later, they have these printed on the wall because that's their vision for the intranet. So they're up on the wall, for everybody to see, which alludes a bit to the working out loud bit we'll talk about in a bit. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's a really, really powerful technique. Sorry, yes?
I just have a bit of trouble understanding the distinction between cover and big headlines.
Cover story is that kind of what I call a big, hairy and audacious goal, which comes from some book I read ages ago, I can't remember which. But it is that big, hard-hitting, intranet saves lives. We've reduced our carbon footprint by 100%. I did one for an energy supplier, and their cover story was we've implemented our knowledge management solution, and now we're number 1 in the which guide to energy providers instead of number 3 or something like that. So it's the big, bold kind of overall difference it's going to make. Does that help? Yeah, well, this is more granular.
That's an alternative for that.
No. These are all, this is, if I was in my ideal scenario, and there's other techniques and stuff, I would have done that. So what's great and that's really about where we are. This is now moving on to where we're going. Yeah, this is the vision. Yeah? So that gives us our context. We know where we are, we know where we're going. Now we better find some requirements. There are requirements emerging from all of these exercises, which as a facilitator you need to capture. But these are very much contextual activities. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, cool. I don't often do this next activity, but I do think it's immensely powerful. This next one's basically called a business model canvas. So it's taken from a book called Business Model Generation by Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pignot. I'll probably pronounce that wrongly. It's a fantastic book. It's based on creating innovative business models. So mapping your business model and then innovating it. If you think of an organisation, startup, whatever, any business, you think about its business model and then think about a project, your SharePoint project. So what they do, they use, this is a 3D nicer version, but they basically map, using Post-it notes, same as all the other, I just go through millions of Post-it notes. I'm not very eco-friendly at all. But you map your business model. So you can map a project as a business model. It has a value proposition. What are you delivering to the business? In fact, that value proposition is probably this. So what are you delivering? Which customers is it? HR department, whole organisation. An extranet, so it's these organisations. The revenue bit, okay, we're not necessarily directly generating revenue from this project, but there'll be value. What is the value that we're getting? And then over here, what are the costs? SharePoint projects, we definitely have costs. So you list them out. You list any partners. Do we need AvePoint or Excella or Metalogix or any of these great organisations to help us to deliver this? And what are the high-level tasks? So you map out the business model, and that gives you a great one-pager. If somebody says, this intranet project you're delivering, what is it? Bam. You've got a nice one-page document that says who it's going to get delivered to, what it's going to deliver, kind of why it's going to be delivered, the sort of base costs, and all the value. So it's a really nice way of representing that. I did some work with an organisation once, and we were doing this, an intranet based on SharePoint, and one of the stakeholders said, well, in the strategy we might be moving to Office 365. How does that change this project? Well, it's great. So you think, okay, with Office 365 back then, this was a year or so ago, we can't deliver, where was it? We can't deliver this piece of this feature, this bit of functionality. So if we can't deliver that, then this customer segment goes, we can't help HR, these costs go down, and you can start mapping, you know, what difference it will make. But it's in a visual way, it's nice and easy to understand. Yeah? So I definitely recommend thinking about this. As I say, I don't do this for every project. I'd like to, but it's sometimes quite a hard concept. You're saying to an organisation, I want to build your business model for your project. And they go, what? You're here to do SharePoint, not tell us how to run our business. But I do think if you can, it's very powerful. Any questions on that one? No? We're definitely running out of time, but you know, we might make it. We might make it. Anybody got anywhere to go next? So, the next one. We're actually getting on to our requirements. The actual requirements delivery, capturing requirements. Another activity, I just love running this with customers. I turn up at the customer with, I haven't got any boxes here, but with a load of cardboard boxes, Post-it notes, glitter glue, googly eyes, basic craft materials, yeah? My kids hate it. I've got all these great craft materials in a cupboard at home. They're not allowed to use it because that's for daddy's work. I've got better pens and felt tips than any of my kids. The purpose of this activity, and you can do it as a group work or as individuals. I tend to prefer doing it as individuals because you understand what each person wants, but you can do it as a group. Just get bigger boxes and more craft materials. But you basically, the technique's based around, if you picture the box as being like a cereal box. So on the front of a cereal box, you have the kind of big, hard-hitting, you know, this is what it's going to give. You know, it's going to wake you up in the morning and give you all your energy for the rest of the day. So that's a big, hard-hitting value piece. On the back, you've got more detail. Top and bottom, I'm never really sure what goes on the top and bottom of a box, but you can put whatever you like. On the side, sometimes there's like the recommended daily amounts and stuff like that. So that may be some of your metrics for your project. Some of the things, you know, we want to increase efficiency and things like that. It's stuff that you can measure. And you basically give people 45 minutes with, you know, a table full of art stuff and say, build me a box that represents your requirements for this project. Okay? And for the first 5 minutes, it's silent and, you know, everybody's going, this is ridiculous, who got this consultant in? And it's, you know, fairly quiet. And then somebody will, you know, be brave enough to stick something on, and then somebody will get a big fluffy sort of ball and stick it on. Somebody, what are you doing there? It's my presence indicator. Yeah, it's a presence indicator. So I'm like, oh, that's cool, I want that. Yeah, and you start building it, and by 10 minutes, everybody's full flow, and you've got people saying, I need a photo of, you know, a dog barking at a tree because of some reason, you know, and you end up with quite bizarre conversations. But you end up at the end of it with a box representing the user's requirements. And then we ask the users then to play those back. And in all the time I've done this, I've never had anybody draw a document library. Yeah? Or put a My Site on here. Because people are using creative tools and they end up, you know, talking more in business terms. And you ask people to then play back over about maybe a minute per person. Tell me the story of your box. Sell it to me. So people are going, you know, on the top I've got made out of pipe cleaners, I've got a handle because I want my intranet to be mobile. Wherever I am, I want to be able to get my intranet content. You know, green fluffy ball on the side, that represents presence information because me knowing where my team is and them knowing whether I'm available is really important because we're geographically dispersed. So you understand the importance of something, you can understand the context, the reason why. You can get some fantastic insights. So that's called Product Box. Who's up for running one of those tomorrow in their business, yeah? I'll come and bring all my boxes, yeah? I've got loads, I've just replenished, I've got glitter glue and everything, yeah? Now it's really hard, I mean, getting people to understand why you would do this and how it works is quite difficult because you're telling them that you're going to create a box. But actually, once you've played it, once you've been through that activity, it is actually really, really effective. And the stories that people tell you back about their requirements are really quite powerful. Yeah?
Did it ever happen and nobody moved? And if so, what did you do?
No, it's never happened. So I tend to, in these workshops, I will probably already put all of the workshop material in the middle of all the tables. So tables are a mess already. Because people, you know, you can put things in nice compartments and people are quite tenuous, they don't really want to take the pen from over there and they don't want to spill the glue. I just chuck everything on the table. Yeah, so it's carnage from the start. And normally I will show a box, a bit like that. I will show a box that somebody's done from a different session. They're usually fairly anonymous anyway, but yeah, if I need to anonymise it, I'll show it and say, look, this is what somebody's created. And I don't focus on that because you don't want people copying. But no, so far, people have just done it. Fingers crossed, touch wood, that'll commence. Okay, yeah?
Would you do this as a separate meeting to the initial steps?
So it depends on how many people you're doing it. So the question was, do you do this separately or as part with the other ones? My kind of default set would be to do the vision one, so the cover story, and then this. So you might do in the morning, maybe 2 workshops at the most. If you try and pack more than that in, your end users are knackered. Yeah, because it is quite hard work thinking in a creative way. So I'll tend to do the vision one, have a break, and then do product box. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Some of the other activities I'll talk about in a second, you need to leave a few business days for you to basically collate things before you prepare for the next. Yeah. Okay. So that's product box. So that gives us some of our users' business requirements. Next, we get into the hot tub. And yes, you did hear me right. Hot tub, again, is just one of these. I wish, sometimes you wish you'd come up with some of these ideas. Hot tub's great. Hot tub is really about generating those requirements that you don't know. So if I come across here, so hot tub is really a way of getting some quite innovative requirements that normally you probably wouldn't capture. The context is that if the analogy is really, if we thought we were, say, designing a new foyer for an office block. So we're kind of coming up, so we want some seating, there needs to be a reception desk, pot plant in the corner, all of those sort of things. And someone goes, let's put a hot tub in the reception, that'd be cool. And of course everyone goes, you're stupid. Why would we put a hot tub in reception? Yeah, and then somebody else goes, okay, hot tub's a stupid idea, but actually our office is 5 miles away from the nearest train station. If people have walked, their feet are aching. Why don't we put a little foot massage thing in the corner? It'd be discreet, it's out of the way, but if people can sort their feet out before they go into the meeting. So you've gone from a really, really crazy idea to something that is actually doable and has value. When I did this one session around an intranet, a user came up with the idea that they'd get every laptop fitted with a one-arm bandit handle. Yeah? And then at the start of the day, you could crank that handle and the home page would randomise. So you get some random news from a different department or something like that. And of course, that's going to cost a fortune. We'd have to do development on Connect, and so it'd be bloody cool, but it's not really a good requirement. But actually going to a home page and just getting random news or bringing news from other departments or other geographies did actually help achieve one of their core values that they were trying to, which was breaking down silos. So we went from a crazy idea down to something that was really actionable. And all you do is, you say, right, okay, guys, you've got 5 minutes, come up with 5 really, really crazy ideas. And you have, accept. If it's not too crazy, reject. I'd always do a small column because you don't want anybody to really reject these ideas. And then normally a big column called transform. And you take, as a facilitator, you then take each post-it note and you go, okay, guys, requirement X, what do you want to do? Do you want to accept it, reject it, or transform it? And you as a group then decide. So, you transform it and you say what you transformed it to. So, it's a handle transformed to random content, whatever. Random content. Yeah, so you build up a picture of basically crazy ideas, but these are ideas you would never have thought. If I asked you, what do you want on the homepage, you're never going to say randomized content necessarily. You're certainly never going to say put a one-arm bandit on it. So it allows you to take people away from thinking about the project in a normal way and get to some of those requirements that actually could add huge amounts of value, but you wouldn't think about it and wouldn't come to the surface from other techniques. Okay, so it's very simple, straightforward, but can be really, really powerful. And for the sake of half an hour, if you get one really, really, really valuable requirement out that's going to add a lot of value to the organisation, that's got to be worth it. Okay? Any questions on that one? So I appreciate we're going through these really, really quickly, but hopefully it's giving you a flavour. So we've got our requirements. I would then leave it a day, have a breather. I tend to then move the requirements onto pieces of card or post-it notes so that we've got basically a list of requirements that we can do stuff with. So product tree, simple idea. What we're doing here really is drawing a very, very poor picture of a tree. You don't have to be an artist. And the way I use this often is saying that all of the requirements, this is basically a replacement for Moscow. Everybody heard of Moscow prioritization? Everything gets put in the must-have and you get one or two token ideas in the we don't care column, yeah? It doesn't work. We don't like moving requirements into that, well, we might have it kind of column. What I say is that the requirements that we're putting here in the root, okay, the root are the ones that fundamentally without them, we're not going to deliver the value for the platform. We're not going to, in effect, have a solution. So I get them to basically plonk those ones there. And again, it's collaborative. People are arguing, moving post-it notes around, and you're listening to the conversation and trying to really facilitate what a good spread of requirements are. And then the trunk are the ones where they're still very valuable, but actually if we don't deliver them today, it's not going to be a deal breaker. As long as we deliver them soon, they're important. We need to not lose track of them. And then the ones up in the canopy are still valuable because it's your requirements and we're still at like high-level business requirements stage. Those requirements are ones that, we recognise their requirements, we recognise there's a need for them. When we get to do them, we'll do them. And this isn't necessarily a time order. This isn't phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. It's just in order of priority and importance, these ones are less important. Now you may find that some of these have to be delivered to deliver the root ones. Some of the ones up there may be out of the box functionality and you deliver them anyway. But as what we're trying to understand is what the business users feel is really, really important and feel they need now to deliver this solution. Make sense to everyone? Yeah, let's take those off. So that's one way of prioritizing your requirements. Another way is, I think it's called stack ranking in the agile world. It's basically where you rank them and you can't have two requirements on the same page, on the same level. Yeah, so that's not possible. So you're forcing people to make decisions. This requirement is definitely less important than this one. And what I sometimes do is do this exercise on the root and the trunk requirements to get a real clear understanding of actually how important they are. And I'll say to clients, if we ran out of money here, how annoyed are you going to be? Will you be annoyed that you haven't delivered this requirement? How important is it? Yeah? So it gets people to talk and come to a shared understanding of actually what these requirements are. Twister. Who's played Twister? Yeah, excellent. I came across this a month ago. I'm not necessarily recommending this, but it's just to kind of demonstrate that you can come up with your own ideas. I was at a conference and we were doing the wrap-up for the conference and I wanted to understand what we could do better. And we generated some reasons and some points around what we could do better in the conference. The guy then got these big sheets of paper and put them on the floor. And there was about 6 of us and he said, right, you've got 2 hands, 2 feet. Vote with your hands, vote with your feet. Put your hands and feet on the requirements on the floor, kind of like that, that you want to keep, that you want to action. So, thankfully it was quite a laid-back conference, but, I don't know whether the CEO of an organisation is going to do this, but it's brilliant. So we did. So I voted for 2 or 3 things, and interestingly then, the guy, the facilitator, a fantastic facilitator, picked up and ripped up and chucked away, right in front of us, the requirements that didn't have a hand or foot on. And then we're all going, hold on, that is important. Well, why didn't you vote for it? You've still got a hand free, you've got a foot free. Why didn't you vote for it? And it was quite an interesting way to get people to think, no, if it's that important, then bloody put your hand on it. If it's not that important, which it obviously isn't, then it's not important. So it's just a silly way, but it's very easy to kind of work out actually what is important. What can you be bothered to stretch over your colleague's back and break your back to grab? I don't necessarily recommend you do this tomorrow. Maybe when you get home. The one thing I would warn you about, although I did say that it was egalitarian, these techniques, is that it can always be what's called the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion, that will try to dominate, will try to they're the people that will use the bigger post-it notes or the ones that are a different colour to kind of say, this is my requirement, this is what I think. So you have to, as a facilitator, kind of spot that and try and cater for that. But normally it's fairly easy and you get into practice. Okay, so watch out for the hippos in your workshops. So I appreciate we're running over time, so I'll flip through the last bit. The last thing I wanted to talk about was visualizing your work. Comes from a blog post by Bryce Williams, who talked about working out loud as a way of collaborating, but also a way of engaging people to work with you and give you their sort of input. So all of these activities are kind of, hopefully great fun and really powerful in the workshop, but afterwards, get those things out. Whether it's images on your intranet or actually in a smaller organization, put those posters, put the hot tub on the wall, get people involved in looking at them and getting their feedback. So you may have only had a limited amount of people in your workshops, but if you visualize these out, you can get more feedback. People can agree, disagree, comment. I'd like to be in the next Twister workshop, please. You can get people to get engaged with you. Yeah? So this is an example of a product box, a group product box. I don't know, for anybody at SharePoint Saturday, that was a collaborative kind of social network exercise. They're great, but if we can socialize the results of what we're doing so we can get other people's feedback, it's a lot more powerful. And one final way of doing that is Kanban, which is a fantastic way of visualizing the work that you're doing. So we have these requirements, we're delivering them. The business probably want to know where that is, what they're doing. Yeah, so the requirement session, I've said I needed to do that, we're doing that. I want to learn stuff and get more business, and done, party. Yeah? People know the state of my conference journey. Yeah? People will understand your business and understand the project and the progress it's going to make. So I think Kanban is a great way of visualizing and working out loud and getting people engaged in what you're doing and getting them involved. So there's lots of people that can talk a lot more about Kanban than me. So I think what this does for us is it allows us to create an evolving visual story. Cave dwellers drew pictures on walls, yeah? When they realized that this one was a deadly, poisonous sort of animal, they drew that on there and they warned, ugh, don't eat that, but do eat that, yeah? And I think your work that you're doing around requirements should become this visual, ever-evolving story. And then we'll get, hopefully, the happy client, and you'll have awesome requirements. Thank you very much.